Hey, hello and welcome. We are happy you could join us, and I do hope you're having a productive day today. I'm your host, Charles Collegy, the security analyst for Accelerated Strategies Group. Today's Security Boulevard webinar is brought to you by, I said it right and when I didn't before, Anitian. I got that. Today, I have with me Emily Cummins, who is the Director of Cloud Security, and John Vecchi, who is the Chief Marketing Officer. And they're going to speak on how to accelerate time to production with automated DevSecOps. So, Emily, if you could please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Emily. I am the Director of Cloud Security here at Anitian. My focus is primarily on our products, building out security compliance requirements into our products, and I am excited to take you all through what some of that looks like in a couple of minutes. Back to you, Charles.
All right, John, now it's your turn.
Thanks, Charles. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm John Vecchi. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Anitian. Coming to all of you with probably been in this industry about 25 years with companies like McAfee, Symantec, Checkpoint, Solera, Bluecoat, Zscaler, and excited to talk to you about this today. So appreciate you attending. Thanks, Charles.
All right, and John and I have participated in many events together, so it's great to working with you again, John.
Absolutely.
So Emily and John are eager to fill you in on how you can deploy your cloud apps in a secure and automated manner. However, you two will have to wait a few minutes as I must take care of some housekeeping items. Now, I want you all to know that the webinar is being recorded, so later today it will be available on demand. Now, you'll receive the link in an email, but at any time you can go to securityboulevard.com and gain access to this webinar and all of the archived on-demand webinars. So feel free to take a look at all that we have available. So now I'm just going to spend just a few quick moments on our Big Marker platform. So on the right side of the screen, you'll see the chat button. This feature allows everyone online to comment on today's event. So, we want the feedback. We want you to tell us how you're going, or if something is of interest, or if you have some activity, put down where you're from, say hello. So this is a community and we're about interaction. So it's not just John and Emily talking, but we want some of that. So we want to hear you. Now, if you do have a question, though, you should use the chat, not use the chat, but enter it into the Q&A tab, which is right next to the chat tab. And we'll try to answer as many of your submitted questions as possible before the end of today's session. But if we're not able to get to them, I'm sure that Anitian will follow up with you. And lastly, you'll see the handouts button. Here is where you can download today's presentation. So at the end of today's webinar, we'll be awarding 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stay with us till the end to see if you're selected. Now it's time to jump into today's session with Emily and John. And John's going to begin, so take it away, John.
Thanks so much, Charles. Welcome again, everybody. I think Emily's going to have control, so she'll advance the slides for me. Welcome. To get started, just a little bit of context on Anitian and kind of where we're coming from. We really kind of started disrupting the market of kind of cloud security automation, cloud application security by focusing first and foremost on allowing independent software vendors, SaaS providers, even government agencies to achieve FedRAMP compliance and very high level compliance in very, very fast. What that means is for companies like Smartsheet, SAP Concur, SentinelOne, Orion Health, and on and on and on and on, we allowed them to enter the explosive and very large $150 billion federal market in a highly accelerated way. In other words, allowing them to achieve time to revenue and market in a single quarter, as opposed to 24 months at a cost of $2 million. And we're doing that every day. We've completely disrupted that market. What we want to talk to you today about is how we wanted to apply that foundation, that approach to the general cloud application security market, to not only allow all of you to access the federal market and achieve other compliance mandates, but literally get to production in the cloud, migrate to the cloud, secure your applications in the cloud at that same pace, at that same speed, and at that same level of security. So that's really what we want to talk to you about today. We're excited about it. We call it Secure Cloud. I have personally spent tremendous amount of time. I spend a lot of my time talking to analysts like Charles and Gartner and Forrester and all of the analysts on what's been happening specifically over the last couple of years, because it is quite incredible what has happened in cloud security, application security automation, and the move to kind of DevOps approach and the combination of security and DevOps for this kind of secure DevOps, DevSecOps approach. So I want to talk to you about some of the things that I found and that we found that are very real trends. You probably know a lot of these, but it's fun to go through them because it kind of sets the stage for Emily to pick up and talk to you about really what we're doing to help this. So let's go to the next slide, Emily. And it's safe to say DevOps and DevSecOps have really exploded over the past couple of years. And this is just to show, when I talk to Gartner, they're saying, look, there's been a growth of 200% of enterprises, their customers, wanting to talk to them about DevSecOps or DevOps, secure DevOps, or just integrating security into the DevOps lifecycle. 200% growth. So Gartner's spending a lot of their time talking about this because it's very real, right? And then if you look at what organizations are saying, I think this stat was from the latest GitLab. And again, the statistics you see here are from a host of resources, including Gartner, Ponemon, ESG, Verizon, IDC, GitLab, State of DevOps Report, host of those things, right? 90% is what organizations are saying, what projects by 2022 will follow kind of a DevSecOps approach. That's amazing, especially when you look at what it was 2 years ago. This was probably 20%, 25%, right? Next slide. Okay, and so what I found when I looked at kind of what's happening, especially over the past couple of years, I found like 3 themes. It's kind of what's happening at the executive level. It's kind of what's happening with this idea of security as an impediment to DevOps. And then it's also what's happening with just the state of threats to applications in the cloud. This slide is talking about kind of the idea of digital transformation and that becoming a board level issue, right? So you see 80% of CEOs saying, hey, digital business transformation, total top priority, especially in the COVID era, right? 2/3 of them saying that their companies must speed it up, pick up the pace. Executive teams, CEOs, C-level suite are a little impatient at their ability to move fast enough now. And then 70% of organizations report that the transformation is taking a little bit longer than expected, especially those that in 2020 decided to really move to the cloud as opposed to prior not moving to the cloud. So definitely a board level issue. We see that across the board in different stats and our discussions as well with C-suites across the world. And so let's go to the next slide, which is really going to talk about, I believe this one will talk about security, enterprises adopting DevSecOps. So there's no question this is happening. If you look at the statistics from even 2 years ago, from 2019, and you move to today, 2021, 20% in 2019 said they were embedding DevSecOps practices, right? To now 60% of DevOps teams, rapid development teams are embedding kind of secure DevOps, DevSecOps into their approaches. 68% say they're implementing DevSecOps into their software development teams. So now you're seeing as more and more DevOps teams members are tasked with security, either fully or in parallel and in concert and in partnership with security teams. that statistic has gone through the roof, right? 68% again of executives say that their CEOs demand that DevOps and security teams prioritize acceleration of processes and delivery, which is why we focus on faster time to deployment and production, which we'll talk about. And 70% of enterprises' DevSecOps initiatives will have incorporated automated security vulnerability and configuration scanning by 2023. So automate, just keep that in mind. Automation is a big thing. We're going to talk about that today. Definitely something to keep in mind as we as Emily moves into her slide. Okay, next slide. Let's look at, and I'm going to finish up here real quick. Okay, now this is a major issue, and again, enterprises we talk to, DevOps teams we talk to, all the research, you know this. Those of you online, you know this, but some of the stats are interesting. CISOs. A lot of CISOs, 71%, say their stakeholders, so executive teams, other teams, view security as impediment to speed to market. And this is just a reality. As security needs to come into the software development lifecycle, that's happening. 70% feel that their teams currently lack adequate working knowledge of DevSecOps. Again, we know that's an issue, right? 84% of organizations said capabilities of traditional security tools. So if you look at on-premise secure tools, traditional security approaches and tools, what happens when you migrate to the cloud? 84% say they're not sufficient to manage security across cloud environments. That's true. It's very different when you move to the cloud. Much more complex. They don't translate. They don't transition particularly. 1 in 5 leaders admitted that nearly 50% of total cloud project portfolios required rework. This is the shift left, this is why there's such a desire to shift left, shift right, shift secure. We're going to talk about that as well. And lastly, 50% of companies admitted to sacrificing cybersecurity for speed. We need to move fast. We understand that. It's about time to production. Everyone's the pressure, but we don't want to compromise or sacrifice security. So we need to keep that in mind. It's a pain point we pay attention to. And 52% again of respondents admitted to a significant shortfall of cybersecurity skills. So there is a skills gap, and we know that. And as you move to a DevOps approach, that skills gap becomes a little bit more focused, right? Okay. Lastly, I think this last one is going to talk just about some of the trends in threats. So what does this all mean from a threat perspective? Gartner has said 99% of cloud security failures through 2025 will be the result of human error, right? So there is the human element. This is why we look at automation very much. We want, let the machines do it if they can. 198, that's the number of separate cloud breaches that occurred 28-29. It's a lot of them. 80% of companies said they're experiencing at least one cloud data breach in the past 18 months. Half of those almost said they've reported 10 or more breaches, right? And it's a lot of money, right? So when you think in terms of these are some of the challenges that are happening, we step back and thought, what can we do to really help this, right? So this is what we're going to talk to you about today. If you go to the next slide, Emily. And lastly, they're spending money. If you look at Gartner, the latest 2021 projected worldwide global security and risk management spending, you see everything some of them have been stagnant, some decreasing. Look at cloud security. It's over double the next closest growth rate of anything. So it's growing. And it's because a lot of organizations are moving to the cloud, especially in a kind of COVID-19, era and economy. And this is happening. So all of those trends, what are we going to do about it? So what we want to talk to you today about is what we think we can do to help this. Again, taking what we've done so successfully and are doing every day on that FedRAMP compliance side. This is kind of a DevSecOps in a box platform. It's a complete cloud application security environment. And Emily will talk to you about that on AWS and Azure today. We'll do Google soon. GCP is coming soon. This is all about securing your applications, literally from build time through runtime, by standing up a complete cloud native and zero trust environment that stands up in one day and really allows you to move to faster time to deployment and production. So I'm excited to have Emily talk to you. She's really on the front lines of having built this and continuing to build it. So Emily, I'm excited to pass the ball over to you and have you take everyone through what this is all about.
Thank you, John. Hello, everybody. Let's talk technology. So I've got an array of slides here to really get into, just as John was alluding to, the trends that we saw in the market. And my world is tech, talking about how we're looking at that from a technology standpoint to see where can we help. So I want to talk about the trends and also give some examples of how, in particular, Anitian, how we came at this, how we drove at it, just to give some examples of what we can do. So I want to start with a slide here. These are really those three core tenets that you heard John mention. There's really these three major areas. Folks need something that's a little bit more simple because security is complex. I'm a security engineer. That was my background. Something that's a little bit more simple to help us cut through all of the different requirements, security requirements, development requirements, compliance requirements, product requirements. There's a ton of different requirements. And we're all trying to get to the same goal. We want to get an application in the cloud, get it production, make some money. So trying to simplify that path of getting that application to the cloud, to that production state. And we want to do it quickly. That's really that fast tenet in the middle there. We want to help folks get there faster because that's, I have a slide coming up in a few slides down that really helps show the timelines that it takes to bring some of these apps to the cloud. Because there is the core app, much a hand talker. There's the core app, but then there's everything that goes around it, the full environment that has to go around that. So, as John mentioned, what if we automated that environment? And that's very much the success we found in the compliance space. So let's bring that over to the commercial space of let's automate the environment that goes around it. Let's speed that up. And then, of course, security. Making sure that these environments that we automate, that they are built securely. So let's get it to the cloud fast. Let's make it a simpler process. And let's ensure that we've got top-notch security on top of it. So the next slide that I've got here, this is a bit of a known metaphor, is the build your own versus buying it your own. It's the house analogy. So for these cloud environments, cloud's been around for 7-8 years. And it did a phenomenal job of making it easier to build these environments. You don't have to have your own physical data center. You don't have to go out and buy Dell Edge servers and put them in there. You don't have to figure those hardware pieces yourselves, but you still have those same concepts in this cloud environment. You still have to pick out a tool, and you see here in this pie chart on the left, there's a variety of different tools that really go into building that environment and securing that environment. And this doesn't include the application. That's really at the center of the pie chart. All these things you're building to secure the application, to secure your moneymaker. So for us, we really took a look at how do we automate all of that? How do we turn that into one footprint that we stamp out and make it very easy for our customers, for folks to really bring their application into that standard environment? So very much the build your own versus the buy your own experience. This is the slide that I mentioned in terms of timelines. So hearkening back to that pie chart of building it yourself, which is still very much a standard practice, very well done. I know for me, I love building stuff, but it does take time and it takes expertise in-house to understand, okay, what are the requirements for this application we want to build? What's the virtual hardware? What's the hardware that we need to support it? What's the IO? Do we need to have some specialized ops? Is it heavy processing? And that's not even the security pieces. All right, so now we know what we need to support the app, but how do we then secure everything around that? Where's the data at rest going to be stored? How are we going to transport it? If there is a hard-lined boundary, which is a term over from the FedRAMP world, if there is that hard-term boundary, how do we secure the boundary? Is it going to be an open access, federating access? There's so many considerations on how to build out the environment that's going to house this app. So for us, we really took a look at what if we standardize all of this? And this is really hearkening to the simple and the fast principles. If we can automate all of this, and this goes to infrastructure as code, which I'll get a little bit more into, if we can just automate all of this, that really takes it to that next level. So not only do you have a cloud, so think of it as you can go out, you could purchase your AWS and your Azure cloud, you still have to build out all the processes. What if we take that to the next level, where you buy your cloud and you buy all the management and operation that goes in there, so you only have to focus on your app. And that is what really shortens down and really compresses down that timeline to have that standardized environment that meets all these different security requirements, so then the app can just move right in. There are hooks if you see here at the bottom left with the 59 days, onboarding the app. This for us, this is just an average of what we've seen our clients to take, about 59 days, because we stamp out these environments in a couple of hours, if that. So it's not about building the environments. It's really more about getting the application moved into the environment. So there's these different hook points, integration points, to make sure that your application is seamlessly integrated into these environments. So let's go into what are in these environments. So this is a more blown out picture of what was in that pie chart. And it's a lot of words. So I won't go through everything I want to do. That's 30 minutes all by itself. But each one of these is a recognized area of a common component that must go into a cloud environment, or I should say should go into a cloud environment. A lot of these different areas, I'll call out a few of them, like container security, encryption, having a WAF, assuming it's an application, you probably need some sort of layer 7 traffic analysis and protection. Having these components is a pretty standard industry practice to secure your application itself. So for us, we took a look at identifying what is really the best in breed or the best native cloud service that can fit into these different categories. And then we've hooked them all together to where you have this complete comprehensive environment built to spec. For us, we built it to 853, well-known industry standard that just so happens to be FedRAMP moderate based. So we've got that built to spec to a well-known security spec. So all of those different configurations, which I'll get a little bit more into in a few slides, all those different configurations go hand in hand with this. But I'll wait on the config part because I've got a slide coming up on this. So I wanted to drill a little bit more into how we're doing this. It's really infrastructure as code with some magic, some arcane mystical abilities mixed in there. So we really took a look at building out infrastructure as code, doing a lot of Terraform, a lot of Ansible, using ARM templates over in the Azure side, really building out this robust library of infrastructure as code. We've got this term in here, security as code, this infrastructure as code to help stamp out these environments. And that gets to what John was talking about of misconfigurations, human error. The more you can automate, the more you can drive down where human error can pop up. So we're really trying to drive down where that human interaction comes at. And when you have these environments that, based off of my experience, which is about 10 years in cloud specifically, they kind of start to look the same. There's always different pieces of them that are different. The app is always different. There's always something, unicorn about the app, about what it needs and what it does. But the components that surround it generally fit, as you saw in that last slide where I had those different categories. Those components all really kind of fit in that same space, which gets into, we don't have a slide on this here, but it gets into really the market saturation challenge that security has if you have a ton of different vendors all in the same space. So it's trying to find that best solution that fits with everything else while providing the best value to the customer. So for us, it's been automated. So those are those environments that we built. So let me get to different topics, same space. For my developers and engineers in the crowd, this is going to be very familiar, hopefully. So this is our SCLC process at a very high level, generally what SDLC looks like. Those are blue arrows: design, commit, build, and test, deploy, production, common stages of an SDLC. And what we've done here in this picture is to help represent really a generation-old challenge that comes with development. Is where does security fit in? So we've got, of course, DevOps now. Those used to be separate, but now we've got DevOps. Where do we get security into this mix? And I won't make claims about how we've solved DevSecOps, because that's really more of a buzzword and a term for the industry. But we are very much looking at how do we bring security closer to DevOps. If we can, what's our interpretation of what DevSecOps really is? So for here, this is a classic issue of where security is involved at the end. The app is built, it's ready to be deployed, it's ready to go to production, and then the security teams come in and look at this. This is my past experience of coming in and be like, oh, let me do some quick code analysis. Let's do some stacks, some dynamic look. What's going on with this app? What are the different requirements here? How are you doing encryption? And then I come back and say, here's all your new requirements you have to go put into your app. So of course, this is a standard challenge. How can we make this a little bit different? There are a lot of tools out there that are looking to move security over in the code development process. That's not necessarily what we're about, what we're looking to do for this. we're really looking at these environments that we fully build out. If this is a standard environment that's built to every time, it makes it very clear cut what those requirements are for any app going into that production. So by knowing exactly what those components are that's in there, being able to test out, hey, this is how, if I make this change to my app, here's the impact it's going to have. That's what we're trying to really float up, to make it very apparent. Here's the house that this app lives in. Here's the requirements. Make it very standardized so that it can really speed up this process, and to use the term that John was using, shift right, help these apps get from development to production much quicker. And you'll see this very large orange arrow, the continuous security. That is another piece that we offer in spades, is being able to ensure that all that security that goes around that application stays up to date, keeps current, all sorts of different alerts that go hand in hand with the standard security. So think about like SIM, Elastic, Splunk, those types of alerts, having those configured to ensure that all of the different pieces, the moving pieces that surround the app, are behaving as expected. So the next one I have, how am I for time? Oh, going good, okay. So the next one I have is about the configuration piece I was mentioning earlier. So configuration really goes hand, in my opinion, goes hand in hand with infrastructure. So not only do you have to figure out what's the infrastructure you want to stand up, you also then have to configure it appropriately. And to me, this is really where infrastructure as code shines, because you're able to identify, here's the different services, the different components that I want to build, and then I also want to configure them to this spec. So to the NIST 853 spec, as we chose, there's, of course, a variety of other frameworks out there to follow that are best of breed, to be able to ensure that those pieces that are being built as expected. So instead of just novice Emily standing up in S3 and just doing a few tweaks here based off of what a YouTube video told me, it's being able to have a template that says, all right, here's what my S3 bucket's going to look like. Here's all the policies associated with that. And all of that is configured out of the box, so that novice Emily does not really have much interaction with S3 unless it's something custom. We've got some numbers here. Shout out to my marketing team for grabbing these numbers and putting them in here to help illuminate how much of a challenge misconfigurations are. I think all of us in the security space know that this is one of the biggest buckets of challenges we have in front of us, is how do we ensure that everything is configured either appropriately or to the best standard it can be. And then it's working with the different teams to help them get those configurations right. So trying to drive all that down to, well, if you automate that out of the box, you don't have to do kind of that people process. You have it from a machine process up front. Talking with my hands here. You have it from a process up front that builds these environments automatically, so you don't even have to consider misconfigurations. This particular slides go a little bit more into this and helps link me into, I'm getting into, I have a boundary diagram coming up, into one, how do we do security? How do we really build out all those different areas of security and make sure that it is configured correctly? A couple of pointers I'll call out here. Building with sys level 1 images, usually a general great rule of thumb to do. You could do STIGs if you're feeling ambitious, but sys level 1 is generally a great standard to build to. And we also look at how do we keep these environments secure. So not only how do we build these out and make sure that they're configured appropriately, they've got all the right security tools that are also set up properly. That's also keeping them there. Now, building is half the battle, maybe 30% of the battle. The 70% of the challenge then is keeping it that way, because now you're in production and now you are the moving target. So making sure that all of your standards, your configs, everything is set up to keep you in that secure and compliant state. So let me get into a picture. I won't spend too much time here because this is really more about Anitian and how we went about doing this. But I wanted to help visualize this for the technical folks in the audience of what does this look like. So I've got 3 major blue boxes here. The one on the right is the meatiest. And this is, if you remember earlier, I had those different blue boxes of different types of components. That's really what this is. So we stand up this meaty box on the right. This is really your management plane, your operation plane. These are the standard components that are configured to the NIST 853 spec that can then hook into, you see the green box on the left. These are the customers that we work with. These are their applications. So then for AWS, we do the VPC pairing of being able to mesh those two VPCs together and hook in, for an example, Elastic is the SIM that we use by choice. Being able to deploy all those Elastic agents, the Beats agents, to the hosts that are over in the green box seamlessly to pull the logs over to the right. Before I'll skip ahead, I will do a quick mention. The WAF that I mentioned earlier, usually that's at the top. So I don't think my mouse comes through, so I can't point things out. But being able to have the traffic flow go from the WAF, well, load balancer WAF, down to the green box to help secure customer traffic. And
Emily, just a comment again. This is what they're seeing here is their AWS or Azure environment, right? It's not hosted in our environment, right? Sometimes that is a point that we make. You literally stand this up in your environment, yes?
Yes, thank you, John. Key point. I live and breathe this, so I often forget to mention that these are environments that we build into our customers' environments. So this is not something that Anitian owns. We don't have a SaaS, we don't have a PaaS, we don't have an IaaS. We build these into our customers' accounts. So this is ultimately all owned by the customer. We do have professional service teams that help with that. We've got the SecOps team, which you can see here. We have some white glove teams that help our customers do that integration piece, but this is all ultimately housed inside. So very much that build your own versus buy your own house. We take a whole house and drop it into our customer's lot, if you will. So let me get back to the security pieces, which I'm very much passionate about. So I'll try to keep it slim for the sake of time. Got a representation here about the type of security that folks are really looking to do in the cloud. It's very much a moving target of where different people need to achieve their security. We have a graph here to help visualize the different compliance frameworks that are out there and the different requirements that go for them. I'm, of course, biased based off of my experience. I used to work for a 3PAO for FedRAMP. I have found NIST 853 to be the most robust framework technically. I feel like all of the different technical considerations that go into there are comprehensive for a full cloud environment. So that is what we targeted to ensure that all those different configurations that we have are up to par with those controls. We've got the mention here, the 325 controls, which happens to correlate with the FedRAMP moderate framework. We've made sure that we've got all of those different controls built towards. And I have a higher level slide here that gets more into really the security tech that's going on inside this environment. This is where I get the most excited. So down at the bottom, we've got the pre-engineered environment. So this is why I've been talking about these environments that we stamp out. They've got all these major different component areas that we've identified best of breed or best of native service to all integrate together to create this comprehensive environment. This middle layer, threat insight layer, this is really a layer that lays on top, a layer on top of these pre-engineered environments. And this is really where some of that visualization comes into play of what's going on in this environment, which is another challenge that we have seen in the industry, is understanding the full scope of what's happening in these environments. It's so easy to turn these environments on and then just enable max level auditing, and suddenly you have tons and tons, you have thousands and thousands of different alerts, and it's alert fatigue. So what do I do with all of this? What is the stuff that actually matters to me? So looking at ways to really raise that up, to use the phrase, drive down the noise, raise up the signals, trying to bring out those different areas to really help illuminate, hey, here's something that probably needs a privilege escalation, or we've correlated 3 different indicators to really mean, oh, this is definitely a privilege escalation. Like an event on its own, if I'm now malicious Emily and I log in at 3 a.m. and I only do that once, it's a little suspect, but that event by itself doesn't really mean much. Now, if I've logged in 52 times within 5 minutes at 3 a.m. and I'm accessing one particular, like a database, and I'm running 100 different queries, all that together means a lot more. Perhaps that's now a data exfiltration event. So building those indicators to show, hey, here's a signal. Here's something that's very real and very possible happening in this environment right now. So being able to raise that up to then that top layer, that security center, of putting that in a single pane of glass or through an API to however folks want to digest this information, to really raise up, hey, instead of, what would that be, like 100 different alerts about me logging in 52 times and doing 52 actions, raising that up as one high confidence insight to say, hey, here's something that needs action taken, either by the security group, the development group, the ops group, just being able to present that type of unified action of, hey, here's something in the environment and it needs some action taken on it. So I'm getting towards the end here. So I have I believe it's two slides left here. And I wanted to close out the security topic before I get into a more interesting area that's separate from security. So what we're trying to do here really is to bring together a variety of different tools that are built to spec, that are built to an industry spec, configured appropriately, and have phenomenal security that goes with it, while also raising up all these different insights to help visualize what's going on in these environments. And we're trying to stamp all that out with our one cloud, which is where the secure cloud business comes into, trying to stamp all that out as, hey, here's this full solution that really helps applications move into it. So instead of trying to build all these different components by hand or bringing security way late to the process, trying to do all of that really upfront and then keeping it secure over time. So the last slide I have here before I hand it back to John and open up questions is really about, what if you're already in the cloud? What if you're like, you know what, greenfield deployment, I'm already there. And I spent 6 months building a cloud. I don't want to start over again. So I wanted to do a mention here of some of these common principles. I believe it's Google who put this out, the DOOR principles, and to really show how clouds who live today, what are some of the different areas that they're often striving to improve. So I've got the 4 on the left. These are the major topics. So the deployment frequency, lead time for changes, time to restore, and change failure rate. So they're kind of grouped into 2. You see we've got the stability, and velocity, which are our own words, and the colors are our own, but the 4 are from Google. So the velocity ones, the ones in the green, that's really in that development space. That's how often can your development team deploy to your production environment. If I may say so, I think this is a very common challenge that production teams have in the world. Is how often can you deploy to your production app? So if you have a small bug that you have to fix, are you able to get that change into your production environment today? Or do you have 3 weeks worth of QA, getting in a staging environment to test it, getting all the approvals lined up? It's how quickly that change can go into the production environment. And this elite column is from Google. It's really how quick can you get there? And it's always a driver, that I believe this is something where you can't achieve the ultimate state. I think this is something you're always driving towards, is being able to really do multiple times a day of getting that down as slim as possible to how often you can get your changes out there. And what goes hand in hand with that is the lead time for changes. So if you know that you're going to have a change coming, you've got a commit that you need to put in there. What's the lead time for that? Does it take months to get a CAB together, which, CCB, change control board. Sorry, not a CAB, change control board. Do you have to get the change control board together to get all the agreements together, to write out the backup plans, the security impact plans? Or is this something that is inherent in the processes that you have so that you can then drive these changes into the production environment faster, and to use that shift right term, allow your app to get to prod faster and to stay in prod faster and up to date more quickly. These bottom 2, this is more around stability, and this also gets a little bit into the security space, really more just in the impacts there. So if there's been a security event that impacts these 2, but largely these are just general items on their own. So if there is an outage, what's the time to fix that? In the cloud, and this is one of the huge benefits in the cloud, is it's much smaller because you have these phenomenal reassurances from these big IaaSes on how they're, I think, what is it, like 9 nines or something like that, on how they're able to keep their services consistently online. But that also then, of course, means that for you living in that cloud, what about for your application itself? So what about for your SaaS? Are you able to provide those same assurances to your customers? Or is this something that is a little bit slower because it takes a lot of time to identify what the challenge is, or what the problem is, and then figure out the fix? And this kind of goes a little bit into the ones above. If this was a bug in the app, how long does it take to push that out to production? The last one here very much fits into these other ones, so I won't spend too much time here. The last one here is, if there was a change, how much time does it take to fix that? If the change failed, how much time does it then fix that failure, which fits into these other ones of how long does it take to restore the service. If it did fail, if the change did fail, hopefully that takes a very small amount of time to get back to a production state to serve the customers. So I believe I actually ended exactly on time. So I will take us to the next slide and hand it back to John and Charles.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, and the last slide there is very interesting because, and I think Charles can attest to this, is a lot of times when I talk to analysts, one of the things, by the way, that we hear is no one's really doing quite what we've done. There's a lot of point products, cloud security, posture management solutions exploding. The idea of this kind of pre-engineered, pre-built, pre-configured, standardized, complete cloud app environment is kind of new. But a lot of the conversations that we have is the question about, can you help existing companies modernize what they have now, specifically around, as Emily pointed out, the DORA metrics. If you're a DevOps team member, it could be the space metrics, the GSA tech guides. There's a host of them that we kind of look at that may be used as a metric to try to achieve a more efficient, robust kind of state. And so it's an important one that not only does this help organizations just, in their digital transformation efforts, get to the cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, get there. But if you are there, to help modernize, to help move toward more of a zero trust, automated kind of posture. And if you don't have to look as far as just the cybersecurity executive order to see a lot of what that talked about was modernizing and moving to a zero trust kind of automation, all of that. So I think that's very interesting. So thanks very much, Emily. We hope that was helpful. I think, Charles, we might have a couple of questions. I saw some come in. So do you want to mention those? Emily can try to take a stab at it.
I'll throw them out there for you guys. I am kind of curious, just to follow up on your last comment about, so do you have any customers that are in the cloud and kind of use you to build something parallel, and then they transition to your platform, or is it really the other way, that they get a lot of information from you and move it the other direction? I'm kind of curious how that works.
So I'd say the answer is yes. I think the very first thing we found was kind of a network effect from our customers who were leveraging our kind of pre-engineered, pre-built environment for, say, FedRAMP. And then they see the power of it, especially from a DevOps, DevSecOps perspective. And then the next thing is, hey, we need this in our commercial cloud. This is very powerful. So the first thing we saw was kind of organizations move and leverage it both for, say, their FedRAMP environment and now for their commercial cloud. And we are seeing, Charles, now, I can't say the name of it, we have a lot of very, very big customers. One in particular definitely was in the cloud and is leveraging secure cloud now, specifically because they saw the power of it on the FedRAMP side. And as Emily said, we can move and migrate to them to this environment and do that in a very quick way, in a way that helps them just avoid from continuing to have to build this house, dealing with all these other pain points. And so that is happening. I think Emily, I don't know if you have any other comments on that, but it's both. I think the thing that's powerful, which is why we wanted to talk about the DORA metrics and those organizations and enterprises who are in the cloud and striving to be better in the cloud and be across metrics like DORA, to be faster, to be more effective, more nimble. It's both. We're seeing organizations on both of those spectrums saying, this is great because we're moving to the cloud. We're just going to move into your house. And others that are saying, we have a house. We kind of need a new house. We're building a new house all the time. Additions, improvements. Let's just move into yours. So we'll have that process. Is that any other comments there, Emily, on your side?
No, I think you got in full, John.
Okay.
Does that help, Charles? Yeah.
Yes, it does. And it looks like a number of of our participants today are in the security side. So a number of their questions are more security than the DevOps side. So I'm kind of bringing those out. The first question from Daryl is, how do you work with current AppSec tools that, may or may not be associated with the platform? And he gave some examples of GitLab or Veracode or SolarCube. So can people who already have relationships or activities bring those in, or is it kind of closed, I guess, is how that works?
I could take this, John, if you'd like.
Sure.
So I would say when it comes to those AppSec tools specifically, you can very much leverage the partnerships that you have already. And if you remember, there was that slide I showed, that big old box that had the different arrows and the orange one at the end. Very much the tools that you use in that pipeline is very much up to you. So whatever that best tool is that works for you, because my own opinion is trying to dictate to developers what tools they have to use is a mixed bag of success. So very much being flexible, what are the tools that are used in that pipeline is very much up to you. And it's definitely something that we're very much in that visual representation of how we kind of encompass that. We sit around that, is we're very flexible in being able to work with those different tools.
Okay. And I think we get similar questions. One's associated with how do you tackle pipeline delays due to the dynamic application security testing, because those scans can be relatively consuming of resources.
That one's a little trickier for us to answer because I don't think that's actually much in the space. It's very similar to how we're flexible, the type of AppSec tools that are actually in that pipeline to ensure that the code that's going in there from a source code perspective, for us, saying that it doesn't matter isn't the right message. But in terms of how we're able to work with what those are, I think that's the better message to give here. So if there are delays from these dynamic scans, that does not have much impact on these environments because these environments are ready waiting for the application to be able to just deploy right into it. So if you have more specifics about the type of challenges, I think that might help here if you're willing to add some detail about what are some of those challenges that you're running into.
Okay. So maybe those will come in after we discuss a few more questions. I kind of want to talk a little about the house analogy, right? So, you drop a house in and I go in and live in it. But now I'm making configuration changes to my house that, so I start with a really nice, secure house and doing good things, but I'm making changes to those. So does the platform or does the tools alert me to when someone makes changes? And if so, can they determine if there's a vulnerability created? So I guess the question here is how much hands-on after the initial development or deployment do you participate in?
I'll take this one too, and then I'll hand it to you, John.
Sure.
It's a mixed approach, the way that we've done it. So the slide that I am very excited about, where I was talking about being able to pull out visualizations, being able to help folks understand what's going on in these environments, because there's so much data in there. So very much from a product perspective, we're trying to bring that with a product approach of rising up. Hey, if you do make these changes, here's what it means, of having those real-time dynamic alerts of, and this change that just came into this environment caused this effect, and being able to show, bring up those indicators of where we knew that this happened, to enable our customers to know, oh, I made this change and now X happened. This misconfiguration is now over here. It works on both sides. So being able to dynamically show, using, say, a config management tool, this particular Apache host is strayed away from its configuration. We can either set that to dynamic, so it comes right back to where it should be, or if it's being intentionally changed, if done just bringing that baseline along with it, so that those configurations stay automated and they stay the way that they should be staying. I wanted to add in, though, there is the services approach, because just like environments, cloud environments technology, it's a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge. So there is always a services approach, the white glove approach of having someone do it for you, we do have the SecOps service. We also have some of those white glove teams to help move those applications into there. The SecOps group is really there to help keep the environment secure if it's desired by the customers, or if they prefer to do it themselves. We also have that product approach to help bring that closer to our customers. Go ahead, John, if you want to add.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. I think the point there is we provide 24/7 continuous monitoring and SecOps for our customers that use our platform. We don't do that as a separate business. On the FedRAMP side, pretty much 100% of our customers use that. Very different here, but I think the reason we bring that up is because we understand what it takes, specifically to your point, Charles, to keep you on the rails, to keep you within that environment and keep you secure continuously as you make changes. You saw the DORA metrics. You make a change, how long does it take? You make a change, you make an update. What does it do to configurations? We try to bring that into the automation as much as possible because we understand the challenge. So we like to think of it for organizations that have, and most all of you do, have SecOps teams that are doing this. We like to think of this as very much monitoring ready by default, so that teams can identify any changes, misconfigurations, any issues quicker, faster, more effectively, more centralized when they're leveraging our pre-engineered environment, than opposed to a house they're trying to build all over and update at the same time, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, it's great. So you've talked to, I know in the presentation you brought up compliance and auditing requirements, and I can see how some of the automation and the tools will work on that. So could you just give a few more moments to discuss, because organizations, especially security and even DevOps and everyone else, they spend a lot of time on compliance and audit issues. So anything that speeds that process would be well appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, John.
I'll just start by saying yes, this is very critical. I mean, if you look at the statistics, the average enterprise has 3 to 4 compliance mandates they're trying to meet at any given time, at least, right? So this is a constant issue. Plus, just audit requirements of the audit teams. We need you to assure that you meet these levels, across the organization. So this is very, very important. This platform, the way I like to think of our platform, because it's built, as Emily said, based on the NIST specs, right, that really meet essentially the FedRAMP moderate spec out of the box, is that we consider that to be kind of a ready once, audit many approach. We use that term. We can show you that because we meet that level, if it's kind of a Venn diagram, a lot of the compliance mandates you're trying to meet are literally all within a single circle. Which means you're kind of well positioned and poised to meet multiple mandates because it's pre-configured out of the box to meet a very high level, which just means it's so much easier to meet various compliance mandates. And I can mention, for example, SAP Concur, one of our customers, when they were building out their AWS environment and had the DevOps engineering team. I mean, they had till the cows come home. Audit mandates, compliance mandates, and one of the things they said when we did a case study with them is they just called in their security and audit teams and said, check out this environment, look what it's built to. I think you'll be happy with the level of this from your perspective, and it very much was the case. So it's kind of that ready once, audit many environment that can help tremendously. And Emily, if you have any other points to make on that. I think we come from that compliance background inherently, so we pay a lot of attention. It gets understated a bit, but it's definitely very important in the environment we build, right, Emily?
The piece I'll add is when I was talking about configurations, there are 325 different controls and configurations that go with those, and that is a heck of amount of work. Of being able to, so when I was talking about the infrastructure, figuring out what is the infrastructure on the compliance side, what is the infrastructure that is acceptable to use? That's a challenge all by itself. So for AWS, what are the different services and scope within that existing AWS ATO? Knowing what those are, And then how do I configure those? Because not all of those services are actually configured right out of the box. There is some customer responsibility to make sure that those services are configured. And then we get into, okay, so what are the areas that AWS doesn't provide? So do we need to bring in a COTS product? Is this something proprietary we need to build? Is this something our customers then have to do? There's so many different challenges that go with answering those controls and interpreting those controls appropriately, which is also a challenge by itself, is what does this control really mean? So when I was making that, I was teasing about the square peg and the round hole, there are some square peg and round holes in these controls of how do I apply this to a 2021 cloud environment to make sure we're meeting the intent, the spirit of the control, and to make sure that all of this then is built to the compliance standard.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have time for one more question, and John, you know me, so I'm going to ask an analyst question, and hopefully everyone else will find this useful. So you talked about your pre-configured tech stack, and there's a lot on that slide and a lot of capable product types and issues. So my analyst question is, how is that licensing handled in that situation, right? Am I going to have to go out and buy licenses for all those products, or is it built into it? I'm just, that's kind of like my analyst question that pops up to me, and kind of a business question too. But I'm curious.
You want to take that, Emily, and how that's built in?
I am probably actually not the best one to take that. Licensing is usually my sales team. Go ahead, John.
Essentially, it's a great question, Charles, and it comes up a lot. It's all kind of built in. Basically, it's all billed to your Amazon account. Everything's all condensed and pretty much ready for you to go. We have it all. We can give you, especially once we're working with you and we understand what your environment is, what the size is it containers, all the instances and everything you have and the solutions. We can tell you exactly what that will be. We know exactly what the pricing is. It's basically all there. It's just going to be billed to your AWS or Azure account automatically. We've worked out all the pricing. We can tell you exactly what it is. So there's the cost for our platform that's going to be billed. It's in your environment. So you just stand it up, swipe your credit card. All the other incurrences are just billed to your account, all right there. You don't have to run off and go. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. So we spend a lot of time to make that very easy, and we can tell you exactly what that's going to cost, in either of those environments. And remember, again, as Emily showed, we didn't show the specific environments for AWS and Azure, but a lot of that environment is cloud native. So tremendous amount of cloud native AWS and Azure tools, right? So that's all just kind of built in and just build as seamlessly as possible to your account. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, that's great. And it kind of goes back again to that house analogy, right?
Yep.
All of those appliances and everything else that I'm getting and connecting to the the gas lines and the electricity, that's all taken care of. I buy the house and those usually show up and we work those out. So with the builder or whomever. So no, that works. That's perfect. And with that, we're gonna close out. I'm gonna just thank you and Emily, John and Emily, for this information. Really, I love the pre-engineered deployment and working to help solve these deployment issues that I know are plaguing people, and to help them with their security concerns, because that is top of mind in all of these deployments of issues. So with that, I'm going to announce the $25 Amazon gift card winners, and it is Kevin F., Rakesh J., Alexander C., and Diego G. So you four will receive an email to the email address that you registered for this webinar, explaining how you can retrieve your card. And so don't forget to check your spam folder if you do not receive it soon. So again, my last time, I'm going to thank Emily and John, our sponsor, Anitian.
Tricky.
Huh?
It's a tricky one, Anitian.
Yeah.
Got it.
And I want to thank our audience for taking an hour out of your day to spend with us. And so goodbye until next time.
Thanks all.